Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone that approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are inevitably ruined. Patrick Henry. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. You know, politicians love the idea of disarming the people they serve, so much so that they'll lie to your face, they'll present half truths, and they'll use every clever ruse they can to get you to go along with it. Frederick Douglass once said, "A man's right rests in three boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box." Let's not forget the soapbox, as is this podcast, where we criticize, mock, and scorn any man or woman who seeks that jewel of right of who see, uh I got that all messed up. There goes a cool introduction. I am so tired, folks. It was a long weekend. It was ridiculously long. So I'm going to make some verbal malfunctions today, or you might call them merble malfunctions, whichever the one. All right. So what are we talking about? Today is Bill Review Monday. We're going to be talking about Assembly Bill 1333 out of California. I tell you what, these politicians, they're killing me. They keep coming after our jewels, our family jewels, and we need to protect ourselves because we're free people. So what's going on? Let's take a look at a news clip here, and we'll see what the haps is with this particular bill.
Assembly Bill 1333 was introduced last week. It would place restrictions on self-defense rights in California, including the rights of people protecting their homes. Action News Now reporter Jesse Angelo takes a look at the bill and what one local sheriff is saying about it.
AB 1333 was introduced last week by Assemblyman Rick Zbur from Los Angeles. The bill seeks to eliminate certain circumstances under which homicide is justifiable, including home defense. It also outlines circumstances where homicide is not justifiable, such as when a person uses more force than necessary to defend themselves against danger. Many law enforcement officials have come out criticizing the proposed legislation. I spoke with the Hama County Sheriff Dave Kane to get his perspective.
Okay, so just think about that for a minute. Many law enforcement officials were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold up. Hit the brakes there, Mr. Legislator." I mean, when the law enforcement folks are looking out for the people and their self-defense rights, I'm just saying that's not a good sign. Let's
We
continue.
are swinging so far outside the realm of what is reasonable by telling people now that under certain circumstances they can't protect themselves in their own home against a criminal element is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of.
Current state
he called it ridiculous. I mean, do you really hear sheriffs really calling legislation ridiculous too often when it's not something that impacts their law enforcement officers negatively when it impacts the people? Like, how often do you hear the word ridiculous? Not very.
law known as the Castle Doctrine states homicide is justifiable when committed in defense of habitation, property, or person. Sheriff Kane says he thinks this law is sufficient and that there's already a procedure in place to determine justified versus non justified homicide.
That is what the district attorney's office does. They look at the evidence, they look at everything that comes forward, and they make the determination on whether this rises to the level of justifiable homicide under self-defense or if it is actually a homicide.
Some gun control groups have come out in support of the bill, but the amount of
course they
criticism
did.
Zbur received prompted a response where he promised to make amendments to the bill, saying, quote, "The goal is to prevent wannabe vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse from provoking violence and claiming self-defense after the fact."
We're going to pause right here for just a second. I will address that later in the show. I'm being quiet now, but it's coming. Don't worry.
"We will amend the bill to make this crystal clear," unquote. Sheriff Kane says any amendment is likely to be irrelevant.
I don't know how you could modify it that would make it any other way than the way that I read it, which is that we are trying to make it illegal to defend yourself in your own home.
Sheriff Kane tells me he and California's 57 other sheriffs will be discussing this bill at their next meeting. In Reading, Jesse Angelo, Action News Now.
All right. So that's the skinny on it. Now, if you wanted to run that bill through AI, well, AI didn't really give us anything that was. I mean, it just didn't come back any better. This is what Grok had to say. Assembly Bill 1333, introduced by Assembly Member Rick Zbur, proposes changes to Section 197 of California's Penal Code, which governs justifiable homicide in self-defense or defense of others. The bill seeks to tighten the conditions under which a person can legally use deadly force, emphasizing de-escalation and proportionality. Key provisions include narrowing the scenarios where homicide is justified, such as resisting murder, felony, or great bodily injury, or protecting home, property, or individuals. So basically, when you need it, introduces a duty to retreat outside the home, requiring individuals to avoid lethal force if they can escape with, quote, complete safety. Inside the home, self-defense protections remain but are refined. The bill also clarifies that excessive force beyond what's necessary to address an immediate threat disqualifies a homicide from being justifiable. Supporters argue, supporters, like if you're supporting this bill, you're a terrible person. You'll see. We'll get through it. Don't worry. You're going to see why. They argue it reduces unnecessary killings. Look, call me crazy, but if somebody's threatening your life, might be a necessary killing. Throwing that out there. If they're threatening your property, potentially a necessary killing as well. Depends on what's going on here. Like if they're stealing your pencil, no. Anyway, we'll get into this, especially amid rising firearm carry post-legal shifts. So basically, a lot more people are buying guns. Oh my God, we better tighten up when you're allowed to actually use them by encouraging non-lethal resolutions. Critics contend it hampers victims' ability to defend themselves, imposing a retreat obligation that could weaken self defense claims. As of its introduction, AB 1333 awaits committee assignment in the California legislature. Its passage would reshape the state's self defense framework, balancing public safety and individual rights. No, no. Okay, I disagree with Grok on that one. Like you don't, there's no such thing as balancing those two. But you see the point here. Like even Grok has been critical. So we've got the sheriffs, we got AI, and yet there are still supporters. Well, we don't want to just take their word for it. We're going to read it for ourselves. However, first, gotta it's not quite the same game that we had last time, but a little bitty game here. So you can see that I have put Rick Zbur's face on the character here on the screen for Pitfall. If you're an old like me, you know this game. If you're a young buck, if you're like 25, you might be like, "Is that Minecraft?" And it is not Minecraft. It, it is the game that I grew up playing. It's called Pitfall, and you just had to basically run your little character. It's a side scroller, and you had to run your little character across, and you had to like jump and do things. Okay, and so we got here. We see a little pond. We got the gators because I'm from Florida, right? So we've got some gators here. Well, we're gonna see if he's gonna successfully jump across the gators or if he's gonna be eaten. Now we've heard from the sheriffs and we heard from AI, but they could be wrong, right? We're not just going to take their word for it. That's not how we do things on this show. So we're going to read for ourselves. We're going to look through the bill ourselves, and then we're going to determine, how we proceed with this. So let's pull up that bill real quick. Let me get to it here. Where are we? Pull that up on the screen so that we can see it. There we go. All right. So we set the game aside for a moment. All right. We got the game. Don't worry. The game will come back. We'll see what's going on. All right. So here's that bill. Now, I want to point out that this bill is 3 pages long. Right. So not bad. Like that's cool. Like we're only talking about quantity here. Like like 1 page would be most ideal. 2 pages, 3 pages, like 2, 3 pages, something that you can read while you're eating your lunch. Okay, fair. Like in length. But a 3-page bill could be a terrible bill, and a 30-page bill could be a great bill. It's possible. Okay? So that's where we are. All right, so let's pull this up and let me read it. Let me see if I can't zoom in just a wee bit here. All right. There we go. I think that's going to work. Yeah, I think that. Let me see if that's good. Can you guys read that? Yeah, I think you can read that. Okay, perfect. All right, so 3 pages here. The very beginning is just the introduction, right? So this isn't the actual language of the bill that's going to go into the statute, the penal code. So it says existing law defines homicide as the unlawful killing of a human or a fetus with or without malice aforethought as specified. In other words, like you kill somebody and you weren't really thinking about it, right? Because when you think about it, that's premeditation. That becomes murder in simple terms. Existing law establishes certain circumstances in which homicide is justifiable as specified. This bill would eliminate certain circumstances under which homicide is justifiable, including, among others, in defense of a habitation or property. So when they come out and they say, hey, you're interfering with the castle doctrine, they're correct because that's what it says in the bill right here. And we're not off to a good start, right? Because you own yourself, which means you have the right to defend yourself. And the things that come from yourself, your labor, you also have the right to defend. If somebody comes and they pull out a knife and they say, hey, give me your wallet, whether or not it's a wise decision, I have the right to say, no, I'm not giving you my wallet and punch him in the neck. Right? Now, will that work out for me? If I'm a ninja, maybe. If I'm just a regular person, perhaps not. But it is my right to say no. Right? My wallet. I earned it, and I earned the contents within it. Goes on, and it says the bill would additionally clarify circumstances in which homicide is not justifiable, including, among others, and I got it highlighted here, when a person uses more force than necessary to defend against danger. All right. Now, proportional force is not necessarily out of bounds. There's an argument to be made regarding proportion, and I have personally made it before. For instance, if somebody walks up and slaps you, like just walks up and just slaps you, shooting them is disproportionate and it should be considered its own form of aggression with proper consequences, right? You have to remain somewhere within the range of that aggression that was inflicted upon you. Like, and there's a range. It's not specific. It's a range, and there are many factors that go into this. But on the surface, the simple way of describing it, like, hey, if someone just slaps you, that's it. They just slap you. Like, right, your wife gets mad because you didn't take out the trash. She slaps you. Now that's wrong, right? She shouldn't do that. So wives, don't be slapping your husbands for not taking out the trash. But let's just say that she did. Well, the husband isn't justified in like kicking her and then to the ground and then beating her up or shooting her, right? Like that's not justifiable because the aggression level toward him did not reach to that point where it required that level of violence to stop the threat, if there even was a threat, right? And you could argue there's no threat on a slap. So you understand how proportion works. All right. So we'll continue on. So it says by expanding the scope of the crime of homicide, this bill would create a state mandated local program. By the way, I forgot Bill here. Let me put Bill back up on the screen here. I'm sorry, Bill. I'm sorry. Don't be angry, Bill. I'm tired. Okay. Okay, deal. Sorry. He said sorry. And I can't even get the voice right. Whatever. I'm so tired. It was such a long weekend. Oh my gosh. And then I was like up really early, awake really late last night. But the show must go on, right? It's got it. All right. So the California Constitution requires the state to reimburse local agencies and school districts for certain costs mandated by the state. Okay. So this is just kind of, whatever. So let's skip to the next page here. This is the actual legislative difference. Now, this is why I say sometimes more than one page is reasonable. So in this case, you could see things are struck out and there's additions to them. So they've got the additions in italics. They've got the things that they're removing struck through, and then they've got the rest of it so that it makes sense in context. Like if you just put in like, here's what we're removing, here's what we're replacing with, but not the rest of the actual statute, then it may not make sense for people to read it. So in some sense, sometimes more than a page or two is reasonable and actually necessary. Okay, so let's go to here. So it says section 1. This is section 197 of the Penal Code. So it says homicide is also justifiable when committed by any person in, and they scratch out any, and they put all of the following cases. This led some to question whether all in this particular case means all of these had to apply or just all of these, because you go from any to all, like any one of these cases or all of these, right? So there were a lot of people. I watched some videos, and some people were questioning, how would this actually be applied? Like if somebody were to go to court, if this law passed, and then they were to be tried and they were trying to say like, no, look, I was within the bounds of the law, then would the prosecutor say, yeah, but you missed one or two of these things. So you actually weren't within the boundaries of the law, right? That's one big concern already. All right. So then we go on a little bit further here. So that was on line 4. And then we get to line 6 where we see commit a felony. So the original sentence was when resisting any attempt to murder any person or to commit a felony. In other words, so this is justifiable. So they've left in the attempt to murder, which requires intent, right? So that means now I have to understand somebody's intent, murder, or commit a felony. Okay, what other kind of felony might there be? Well, rape is a felony, right? I believe so. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure it's a felony, right? Severely beating somebody up, a felony. Stabbing somebody, a felony. But maybe you're not trying to murder them. Maybe you're just mad and you're just like, look, I'm just going to stab you and avoid, any arteries or anything, so you don't bleed out. But you're going to be injured really bad. Or what about a baseball bat to the knee? Right? That seems like it'd be a felony. But these might be excluded now. All right. And so they've excluded that. It's interesting, because it just seems like they're trying to remove other forms of violent aggression that rise to a felony, armed robbery, so on and so forth, and then just leave in murder. Okay. Well, how do I know if it's murder or not? Right? Because I can't just say, hey, this person was severely beating me, which is a felony. You see the point here? See where the wording matters? All right. Going on down the line. Number 8, line 8. When committed in defense, and this is where they scratch it out, of habitation, property, or person against one who manifestly intends or endeavors by violence or surprise to commit a felony, or against one who manifestly intends and endeavors in a violent, riotous, or tumultuous manner. Okay, so they've removed habitation and property. And then in that place, they put when committed in defense of a person against one who manifestly intends or endeavors in violent, riotous, tumultuous manner to enter the habitation of another for the purpose of offering violence. I thought that was kind of funny, like offering, like, excuse me, sir, may I offer you some violence? I'm sure that that probably has a legitimate legal meaning, I assume, but it's just funny when you're reading it as a layperson because you're like, who offers violence? Like, hey, would you like some violence? Remember the Grey Poupon commercials? Like, excuse me, sir, do you have any Grey Poupon? Excuse me, do you have any violence you can offer? Anyway, side point. I was just nitpicking there. All right, so again, remember, this is homicide is also justifiable in these cases. So we're removing things. So we're removing when it's justifiable at this particular point. So then we go down and we've got lines number 18 through 23. Okay. So this is where it talks about great bodily injury and mutual combat. So they're removing. Okay. So this is the section where it's talking about defense of somebody else. And they're removing commit a felony or to do some great bodily injury and imminent danger of such design being accomplished, but such person or the person on whose behalf the defense was made, if he or she was the assailant or engaged in mutual combat, must really and in good faith have endeavored to decline any further struggle before the homicide was committed. So do some great bodily harm injury. So if I want to bash your knee in, well, that's stricken, you know. And if we've engaged in mutual combat, that's that's so funny. If he or she was the assailant or engaged in mutual combat, must really and in good faith have endeavored to decline any further struggle before the homicide was committed. Like they're removing all that. They're going to replace all that with to do some great bodily injury and imminent danger of such design being accomplished. It's a little unclear exactly what that means, design being accomplished. Okay. But it does appear that they are going to say, like, if some great bodily injury is happening to somebody else, you can kind of step in, right? Because that's when it's lawful. And it has to be like a spouse or parent. So it's like somebody's attacking my wife. And I think there's some great bodily injury. Now, if there's not great bodily injury, I guess I can't step in, right, and defend him with potentially lethal force. Because again, I want you to think about this. When you're defending against force, sometimes it escalates, right? If somebody is trying to attack my wife, some man comes over and tries to attack my wife, and then I jump in to defend against that, like it may escalate from that point. It's not like I'm just going to step in, he's going to necessarily back down. It may escalate. So it may get to the point where homicide occurs. But the original cause of it was like, hey, he was talking trash to my wife. And so I stepped in between him and my wife and I said, hey, you get out of here. And then he takes a swing at me. And then now we're fist fighting. And then eventually, it ends up that I overpower him and take him out permanently. Well, what does that mean? Right? What are the consequences here? All right. So then we get down here and we're at 29, line 29, or yeah, line 29. So this is interesting because these are like the subsection. So it says homicide is not justifiable when committed by a person in all of the following cases. Now, in this particular read, my take is that any one of these. So the way that all is being used here is any one of these, same thing. So, number one, when the person was outside of their residence and knew that using force likely to cause death or great bodily injury could have been avoided with complete safety by retreating. So, this makes you a duty to retreat. So, they are correct. You have to retreat if you can do so with complete safety. Now, it's unclear what complete safety actually means, especially when they're revising this whole statute and make it like ultimately what they're doing is they're saying you have to provide you have to say, here are all the ways under which I was justified. And it's very narrow, which means you're going to have that much better read of the situation rather than, hey, this person assaulted me. They were bigger than me. I thought they were going to kill me because they were punching me and that crap hurt. Right. And I was on the ground. They were on top of me, and they didn't seem to be letting up any time. I couldn't get out. So I was able to grab my firearm and I shot him. And then, they might say, well, you might have been able to retreat, like you could have wiggled your way out from underneath of them, or like it's unclear. And now maybe that scenario is not exactly the best scenario to criticize this particular portion of it, but I think you get the point. Is that when things pop off, you're really moving at a fast pace. So this idea that you could avoid something with complete safety by retreating is not always clear. Like there's that fog of war. Well, it applies to fights as well. And this is when homicide is not justifiable. When the person was the assailant engaged in mutual combat. Now, this is the part I wanted to get to really. What I really want to focus on this part because you might remember the video of the two girls that were fighting. I think it was like in Minnesota. It was one of the northern, the Midwestern states up in north, somewhere around there, like Minnesota or something like that. And it was like a white girl and a black girl, and they squared up to fight on the street. People were videotaping it. They were egging them on. And then the black girl got the advantage, and she's literally on top of the white girl, and she's like banging her head on the concrete. And you can hear it in the video. It's really cringy. Like you're like, ugh, right? But you can hear this. And so they squared up to fight, but and as Maj Toure from Black Guns Matter points out, he goes, when you square up to fight with somebody, you don't know the level that they're going to take it. Now, him and I think slightly disagree in that if you square up to fight somebody, you may not necessarily be internally agreeing and saying like, okay, this simple fight, I'm ready to take it to the death, mutual combat, because that would suggest that every fight is basically gladiator. It might become gladiator, so it's wise to keep that in mind. But I think also at the same time, we have to be careful and recognize like somebody probably just was ready to duke it out and, maybe punch somebody a few times, give them a bloody nose, a black eye, humiliate them, and then walk away. They may not have been like, I'm ready to take this to gladiator level. But here, it's saying homicide is not justifiable if you engage in mutual combat. So it doesn't matter that maybe that mutual combat now has taken a turn for the worst. The person, rather than just simply fighting, is putting you in a position where you might actually die. And so my read of this says, if you square up with somebody and they get the upper hand and they go too far, you're still not justified in shooting them because they can just be like, yeah, well, you stepped up. Shouldn't have stepped up. Doesn't matter that they were, trying to crack your skull on the concrete. That's that whatever. Shouldn't have stepped up. Like what kind of crappy law is that? You know? Because at the end of the day, again, did you sign up for that full length? Now, you should be mindful of that, and it should stop you from doing it in the first place. But if you do, you should have the right. You should retain the right to use proportional force to the proportional force that's used against you. If this person is taking it to the death, well, then so shall I. All right. Let's see. Continuing on, we're on page 3 now. So this is interesting down here because now it gets into some exceptions. So that this portion of the law that they're adjusting, homicide is not justifiable when committed by in all these cases. Then we get down here and we say, all right, here's some exceptions to those rules. So number one, the person reasonably believed that they were in imminent danger or death or great bodily injury and had exhausted every reasonable means to escape such danger other than the use of force likely to cause death or great bodily injury. So now it seems like our scenario of somebody cracking your head on the concrete, perhaps now this will allow you because you're like, okay, I was in danger of death. But then again, we're still at this question of exhausted every reasonable means to escape. And the reason I'm pointing this part out and I find it problematic is because remember, like, how many videos have you seen online where somebody looks back and go, yeah, but they could have done this. They could have done that. They could have done this. Like, people second guess what you could have, should have, would have done all day long. It happens after every single one. So it's not always as clear. Like, it reads in one sense, like, well, yeah, that makes sense. If it's a reasonable, escape, you should take it. Right. That's how it reads. However, Monday morning quarterbackers, they have a different version of what reasonable means. And so that's a problem because the prosecutors could do the same thing. So it's not clear. Not to mention, it forces you to always try to escape. So rather than dealing with the threat, you are now charged by the law, you're tasked by the law to try to escape, to get away. Like, that's your priority. You got to get away because you have a duty to retreat. And then we've got this. Now, I've highlighted this in orange just so that, because I can appreciate it, but I think in the context of this bill, it's not actually very good. So in good faith, it says the person withdrew from the encounter with the other assailant or assailants and indicated clearly to the other assailant or assailants that the person desired to withdraw and terminated the use of any force, but the other assailant or assailants continued or resumed the use of force. All right. So if somebody if somebody tries to withdraw and then they continue, right? Like, so I'm fighting you, I'm beating you up. All of a sudden, you get the upper hand, maybe, and then I break away, and I'm like, all right, I'm done, I'm done. And then I come back at you, and then then it seems like, okay, now you have the right. Here's an exception carved out for you, and so I can appreciate this idea that if somebody withdraws, then you should withdraw your aggression as well. Again, proportionally. If somebody else tries to run, you shouldn't shoot him in the back. If somebody tries to back up and then just reload, well, that's a different story. So I can appreciate this portion of it. But in the context of the whole bill, I don't think it much matters, right? Because at the end of the day, who's defining reasonable? Who's defining escape? And the sheer fact of the matter is you're required to try to escape, but you shouldn't be. If somebody's if somebody is threatening you, you should have the right to defend yourself and not have to do anything other than simply demonstrate, yes, I was under threat. And in the moment, I made the best decision that I could. This person was pummeling me. They were bigger than me. They were on top of me. So I shot them. End of story. Right? No further explanation necessary. But this bill, it muddies that water all over the place. And it makes it very, very unclear what your rights really are. And when I say rights really are, I mean how they're going to be protected. I believe your rights are a thing. You have the right to defend yourself. This bill makes it unclear if you really can defend yourself, under what terms, and so on and so forth. It's a terrible bill. Absolutely. It's a terrible bill. I reject it completely. I don't know. Like, he's talking about the Rick Zbur. He's talking about amending it. No, I don't think I don't think there's any amend. Just like that sheriff pointed out, there's nothing to amend. They've already got the laws on the books that where a prosecutor can say, all right, were you justified in homicide here or were you not? And I think that's a much better. Even that probably doesn't get it right all the time, but that's much better than codifying this ambiguity in the law. Now, let me go back to our little game here. So we've got Rick, and you're probably like, are we going to feed him to the gators? But not just yet. So after intermission, because Rick responded to some criticism, like a whole bunch of people. Like, there's a bunch of podcasts out there, lawyers and just 2A supporters and so forth. Other podcast bros and whatnot. So a lot of people were talking about this, and so he responded. And so we're going to come back after we do some comments here, and we're going to and after the intermission, and we're going to look at his comments, and then we're going to decide what to do with Mr. Zbur here. So let me go ahead and get to some comments. See, get my music going. There we go. It's my cool music. I think I've got it set up correctly. Where last week it was like trying to click the button to turn it off, and it just wasn't. I think I got that fixed. So let's see what some of the comments. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments. Let me did I not? Boom, there we go. All right. Change it up totally. All right, let's see what we've got here. Let's see here. I like this comment. You guys listening would have known which bill Liberty Dad was talking about today if you were on locals. That is true. I am posting information. Like yesterday, I posted about this and I was like, hey, this is the bill. And there's more to talk about. We're going to talk about mom's demand here in a little bit too. So we're going to talk about Rick Zbur's comments on this bill, or on the criticism of this bill, and mom's demand. Be fun. Let's see. Time Surfing Alien says, defamation of character. There wasn't till I remember Kyle being cleared. I think so. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. That Liberty lady points out what happens in California and New York will happen to a state near you. It will take longer for states like Florida and Texas, but it will happen eventually. I agree with that. Now, it's possible to stave it off, so it's like, I wouldn't say necessarily it's inevitable, but like that is the trajectory. Like what you see happen there can easily become your future if you're not diligent and you don't put a stop on it right away. And I think people in California need to start putting their foot down, like both feet down, on the necks of their legislators. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see what else we got here. It looks like mostly comments. People just. I like this. Imminent danger as determined by fascist. Time Surfing Alien says yes. Basically, these people are like, they just keep seeking more and more control, and they're like, I'm not a fascist. Like, wow, really, you're not? Yeah, you just keep wanting more and more power, and I have to. And now you're putting more effort on the victims to prove that they were doing the right thing. We can't just look at a situation and be like, you know what? Maybe this person shouldn't have done it. I mean, we can talk about proportionality and stuff, but at the end of the day, it seems like we're really moving away from this idea of you were wrong and you shouldn't have been doing that to, well, they were wrong, but let's talk about what you did in response, because, it seems like you took it a little too far. It's just crazy. Let's see what else we got here. I'm not even sure I understand what this means. Karate Kid rules or gladiator rules, Joe News. I mean, well, okay, I think I do. So yeah, like that's the point. Like if somebody squares up to fight, what rules are they fighting by? Well, if the bill it makes it unclear, then everybody might say, you know what? F it. It must be gladiator rules. We squared up, right? Oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Let's see here. Okay, I think that's good on the comments. So we're gonna head on over to our intermission. We'll come back and we'll talk about Rick Zbur's comments in response, and then we'll also talk about Mom's Demand. My favorite group of all time, absolute favorite group. Love them, folks over there. Yeah. All right. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, so we're back. Let's talk about the response that Mr. Zbur gave. So here's what he said. This is so crazy. All right, here it is up on the screen. He said AB 1333 was never intended. What do we always say about unintended consequences? It was never intended to limit a crime victim's right to defend yourself, your family, or home. Sounds like he's acknowledging that he doesn't know how to write a damn bill. Like, oh, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it like that. When I said you people, he didn't really say that, but you get the gist. Like if somebody's like you people, and then like, that's not what I meant, right? The goal is to prevent wannabe vigilantes like Kyle Rittenhouse from provoking violence and claiming self-defense after the fact. So let me just point out where he's lying. Nothing in that bill was talking about provoking violence. Nothing at all. We read it. You just read it with me. Nothing in there was about provoking violence and then claiming self-defense after. There was none of that. Had nothing to do with it. It was limiting how and when you could defend yourself with lethal force. It was taking and saying, all right, victims, you're going too far in defending yourselves. So we're going to try to narrow it down a little bit, so that the people trying to harm you won't get harmed. That's what it was. And we just read it. Like, I'm not making it up. I'm not going with some crazy right winger had to say. Like, no, we just read the bill. We walked through it, highlighted it. That's what it said. So he can say it was never intended for this or that. Is he incompetent or is he being dishonest? Or is it both? I'll take both. We will amend the bill to make this crystal clear. No. If you have to amend the bill to this degree, like if the bill was just like slight miswording and you're like, oh yeah, if you use this word, if you use the word all instead of any, then that might suggest that that all these criteria have to apply where maybe you only meant that any one of them did and that was your only change, then sure, make an amendment there and say, okay, you know what, miswording on my part, I apologize but otherwise, the core of this bill, would stand. But in this particular case, he's basically like amending the bill would basically be rewriting it. There's no, like, even the sheriff pointed out, he's like, I don't see any amendment that you can fix this because you can't, because it's a trash bill. And then because he calls out Kyle, Kyle gets in on this because he's on X. He says, I look forward to testifying against this bill. I'll see you in California. They grow up so fast, don't they? This kid was like 17 years old. Like, what was that? 2021, something like that, 2023, something. I don't remember which state it was. Just a couple of years ago. And he was like 17 years old. And like now these are not all of his responses are great on Twitter. I mean, he's still a young guy, but like this is a pretty solid response to that. Because the guy did call him out. He's like, look, we want to stop these Kyle vigilantes. Well, here's the really fun part about what Mr. Zbur had to say. Actually, Kyle did exactly as the bill currently exists. He tried to flee an attacker. He fell. Then he only shot once the attacker continued to aggress. So if you go back, and we're not going to rehash this whole argument because I know a lot of people like to have it. And they're like, no, you shouldn't have been there. No, this shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened. Blah, blah, blah. Like, look, we saw the video. It was tried in court. We're done. But the video did show that Kyle was trying to get away. He trips and falls, points his AR at the guy. The guy lowers his weapon, and then he raises it back up once Kyle lowers his firearm. And then Kyle throws it back up and shoots the guy in the arm. That played out exactly as the bill is written, right? So, like, what do you mean vigilante? And then furthermore, if he wants to call him a vigilante, what Rick is telling you is that he disregards the rule of law when it doesn't fit the narrative that he would prefer. Like it or not, Kyle was found guilty, or not guilty, after the trial, right? He had a trial. They found him not guilty. They looked at the evidence and they said, nope, looks like you were trying to flee. Dudes were hitting you with the skateboard. By the way, skateboards are pretty hardy. You could kill somebody with a skateboard. Okay. You hit them in the head with the trucks, the part that holds the wheels. Those are made of hard metal. You could kill somebody. You like kill them dead. His life was in danger. I mean, maybe he would have got away with it if he didn't have a firearm. He might have only went to the hospital for a little bit, but it was a tumultuous situation. So, as far as I'm concerned, the law found him not guilty. Furthermore, the man who he shot in the arm acknowledged that he was chasing Kyle. So take a look at this clip.
I'm going to use the word chase. You began chasing or running after a man who was running away from you, correct?
That is correct.
Oh, he acknowledged it. He was like, I acknowledge that is correct. I was chasing a guy that was running away from me. That's why he was found not guilty. By the way, thanks to Copper Jacket TV. I watched their podcast episode, and they pointed out that video clip. They reminded me, like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that part. So thanks to them for that. So what Rick Zbur is telling you is he doesn't give a damn about the law because it doesn't fit the narrative that he wants. And the narrative that he wants is to call Kyle a vigilante. In order to do that, he's going to modify the law so that in his mind, it would have stopped a vigilante like Kyle, except for even as crafted, it wouldn't have stopped him. Because number one, it said nothing about provoking anybody. So even if you want to make the argument, say Kyle went there to provoke people, which a lot of people made the argument, you still would be wrong because the bill doesn't even address that. So he's completely lying in his own tweet, right? His own post, he said it, not me. I'm not misinterpreting him. I'm reading what he wrote and I'm reading the bill that he submitted, and they don't match. And then furthermore, he's trying to criminalize, other people. He's trying to craft legislation on the basis of somebody being found not guilty. Let that one sink in for a minute. Just think about that for a second. Something happens to you. You go to court. You're tried. A jury of your peers finds you not guilty. Some legislator somewhere else out there says, nah, that's not good. We need to stop people like that. I'm going to craft legislation. He's crafting legislation to limit people's self-defense on the basis of a not guilty verdict. How dangerous is that? I mean, why have any laws if they mean so little? Why have a legal system if it doesn't matter, if you're just going to go and create more legislation? I mean, at least legislation, like all these laws that are named after some little child that gets killed, at least that legislation is done in response to something that we all agree was a horrific incident, and that it's named after the victim to try to allegedly prevent another victim. In this case, the law is he's not really naming it after Kyle, but he kind of is. He doesn't say this is Kyle's law, but since he invoked Kyle's name and said, this is what we're trying to do with this law, it might as well be considered Kyle's law. And we want to prevent somebody from getting a not guilty verdict in the future. That's tasteless beyond belief. And he needs thrown out. So now we are back to our game. And so I'm going to have to feed him to the gators now. There it is. I know this. I'm so sorry. All that wait for such little. Games weren't that much back then, okay? They were very simple. And it was a lot of time to edit that. So you get what you get. But I fed him to the gators. That's the least we could do. But honestly, here's what really needs to happen. The voters in California, they need to have a recall and remove him. Plain and simple. They just need to say, like, look, you don't care about the rule of law. You can't even write a bill. Then you lie about what you wrote about. You are terrible. You're worthless. You're a vile person. You don't belong governing anybody. I mean, at that rate, I mean, and I'm not trying to suggest that he should be subject to any kind of legislation, but at that point, I'm questioning whether he could govern his own self. He probably can, because he probably knows exactly what he's doing. And so really it ends up he's just a liar. An intentional liar, and he's trying to deceive the people out of their rights. And yeah, he should be fed to the gators, but he definitely should be removed from office by the people. Take whatever process that you have and run with it. All right, let's get to Mom's Demand. This is fun. Man, I tell you what, that group, good Lord. I can't even sometimes. All right, so here we are. Mom's Demand, News and Press. Fact sheet AB 1333 is a life-saving legislation aimed at preventing those who shoot first and ask questions later. So they're running with the same narrative. They're like, oh, this is going to stop vigilantes. Hello, moms. No, it's not. Apparently, you can't read. Did you know, by the way, it's like some 49% of American adults read proficiently at their level, right? Like some 49%. Percents. We're not going to talk about the people that can speak. We're just talking about people. We're just talking about reading. But some 49% read at or above their appropriate level. Think about that for a minute. I just read the bill. You read it with me. This bill has nothing to do with shooting first and asking questions later. All right, let's read it. Sacramento, California. Last week, Assembly member Rick Zbur introduced AB 1333 to update the state's self-defense laws. The legislation explicitly clarifies that Californians must avoid resorting to fatal actions when they have the opportunity to de-escalate or disengage from a conflict outside their homes with the aim of preventing violent confrontations. Well, we know it wasn't really outside their homes because it said so. We read that. In recent days, there's been widespread misinformation shared across platforms in an effort by right-wing extremists. And they've got a link here. And if you go to that link, that's Kyle's link that I just showed you, where he says, I'll see you in court to speak against his bill. That's the effort of right-wing extremists. Okay, and I want you to think about that for a second. Rick Zbur was criticized for it. He calls Kyle out by name. Kyle responds to him. And then Mom's Demand's like, man, I can't believe this right-wing extremist, the effort that he's doing to mischaracterize the bill. He didn't say anything about the bill. He just said, look, I look forward to coming to California and testifying against it. That's it. And he said it in response to Zbur calling him out. But do Mom's Demand give any attention to that? No. It continues on to say they mischaracterize it as a left-leaning criminal justice policy. So, and then they link to Politico. Okay, so we're not going to read the Political article, but presumably Politico is reporting somebody else. So you'd have to go and read Political's article, and then you'd have to click to their links and say, what are you? Where's the original source? This is the problem with a lot of these reporting. A lot of the reporting out there is that they link to things, and you have to go link to link to link to link to finally find what is the source that everybody is making their assessment on. And in this particular case, in at least one of the sources, Kyle does none of that. He just says, I'll see you in court. That's it. There's no there's no characterization of any kind. He just basically says, I'm going to testify against the bill. There's no characterization of it. He just, other than like he disagrees with it, but he doesn't characterize it as anything, not in that tweet that they link. And then they say that strips Californians away from the right to self-defense. And then they link to a gun owners, California.com article. Now that would probably be, that would constitute an actual source of a quote unquote right winger and their characterization of the bill. So in fairness, that one link finally works. This is not true, they say. AB 1333 is anti-stand your ground measure that does not impact the Castle Doctrine. But if you go and you watch, like even videos of lawyers, even the sheriff was concerned about it. So you've like, sure, you got right wingers, and yeah, they're going to oppose left leaning stuff. But then you've got lawyers out there that are like, yeah, that's not how I read this. It's concerning. Then you've got the sheriffs out there like, this is bad. Then you have Assembly Member Rick Zbur saying, I'll amend this to make it more clear. Guess what? If you have to amend something, all your critics are probably on the right path. Because otherwise, you would be like, you could make the same argument that I'm making now. These people can't read. It's very clear in the bill already. I don't need to make any amendments. But he does, because it's not as clear as mom's demand over here is saying. So either they can't read or they're just running with their agenda. Probably both. The bill is an effort to prevent unnecessary tragedies and bring California's law up to the standards used in other states. What unnecessary tragedy? Okay, Kyle, fine. Kyle killed 2 men and then injured another. Of the 2 men, one had a record for child pedophilia. Not really a tragedy there. Now, that doesn't justify the killing because Kyle didn't know that, and nor were they in the act of doing anything, right? But if we're going to talk about tragedy, if a mom and her kid are driving down the road and a semi truck slams into them and they die, that's a tragedy, right? If somebody who's got a record for harming children attacks a person and that person defends himself with lethal force, that's not a tragedy. They haven't listed any tragedy. They just keep crying about Kyle because they're mad about the verdict, because they don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe in, hey, our system is what it is, right? They're just looking for, did I get the result that I wanted? And if I didn't, then I'm going to start crafting legislation and I'm going to start creating a narrative by lying about people and lying about what I wrote about. And then other people will lie about what you lied about writing about. Like, this is getting deep. Here's what to know about AB 1333. Now, remember, we just read the bill. So I'm not sitting here like just telling you without having walked through it. Not just giving you some crazy opinion and you have to decide whether or not you're going to believe me or go read it yourself. We just read it. We walked through it. We went together. This bill prioritizes safety. Whose safety? Think about that for just a moment. The bill is talking about when you can use force, under what threat conditions. It's not your safety if you're the victim. It's the perpetrator's safety. They're like, look, this person that's committing a crime, we should give them a little extra safety because, we got this wild, wild west cowboys out there where guys are killing, former pedophiles who've been convicted and are now attacking people in riots because it's a tragedy that these guys are dying. It's not a tragedy. Don't care. Maybe you shouldn't have been out rioting. Maybe you shouldn't have chased after people like the guy said. Maybe mom's demand and Rick Zbur need to learn how to read. Fact, this bill promotes racial justice. The hell are you talking about? Stand your ground laws dramatically escalate violence, leading to 150 additional gun deaths each month nationwide, with an increase of 32% in Florida's gun homicide rate alone. In states with stand your ground laws, homicides are deemed justifiable 5 times more often when white shooters kill black victims compared to the reverse scenario. Okay, maybe that is the case. Maybe it is true that they're deemed justifiable 5 times more often. The real question is it correctly deemed justifiable? Doesn't matter whether they are. See, they're starting with this assumption that because more black people were killed with stand your ground justification, that therefore it must be wrong. Like, this is the logic they're working with. They're like, well, shouldn't we see equal number of black and white people being deemed justifiable? The deaths of black and white people? Maybe, or maybe not. It depends. Are black people disproportionately attacking white people versus white people attacking black people? Maybe, maybe not. But they don't care about that. They're just looking at the end number and saying, I think we should have proportionality in our killings, which would require, of course, proportionality in people choosing to commit crimes, which is not really the case. And I'm not suggesting that, like, this is not to say, like, black people are more violent or anything. It's not saying any of that. This is just saying, like, what are the facts about who is doing what? What are the facts of these particular cases where 5 times they're deemed justifiable 5 times more frequently? What are the facts about them? I don't want to know that just 5 times more often, so therefore it must be bad. That's some piss poor logic. All right. AB 1333 responds to these dangerous trends by clarifying the state's self-defense law. No, it's changing them. It's not clarifying the laws. It's changing them. Rick Zbur said he was going to clarify his own stuff. He was like, okay, I'm getting some pushback. I'm going to clarify what I really wanted to have happen. Even though clarification in this particular case would require rewriting the bill, because what he's saying he was intending to achieve wasn't even in the bill, again, as we just read. So no, this is not even true. Fact, there's more guns in public in California following the Supreme Court's reckless Bruin decision. And so what? And again, here we go, not respecting the rule of law. You ever notice that liberal people really love to say the law is the law, Supreme Court ruled, but then when the Supreme Court rules not in their favor, whoa, we need to do something about that. They're reckless. I can't believe they would do this. So they only respect the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court rules in a way that favors their narrative. If the same Supreme Court had said nobody's allowed to have a gun, they'd be like, woo, Supreme Court was awesome. They did a good job. They're really wise. We should give them a pay raise, right? They'd be saying all this crazy stuff. They'd be celebrating. But take that same Supreme Court when they use their same intelligence, their same education, their same reasoning to come to a different conclusion, all of a sudden they're reckless. That's because moms demand, just like Rick Zbur, they have an agenda. That's why they're making, like, none of this is fact. Instead of fact, it should just say, like, demagoguery or something. It should say anything else. It's not fact. Fact, 11 states have similar laws on the books. Okay, maybe that's a fact. But again, so what? All have laws that explicitly require you to disengage or de-escalate when safe to do so, rather than take fatal action against another individual. Okay. And people like to make this correlation causation issue, and they say, oh, well, look, they have these laws and their homicide rate is this number, so therefore it must be the result of laws. Couldn't have anything to do with, like, maybe the nature of the people or anything else, right? Has to be the laws. The laws are the reason why they get their outcomes. And again, they want their outcomes. That's what they want. They're not really looking for justice and truth, the American way. They're not looking for any of that. They're looking for outcomes. And they will twist and bend whatever words and language they have to get it. Fact, Wisconsin law protected Rittenhouse by failing to define imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. So again, Rittenhouse. They keep pointing at him and saying, Rittenhouse. Okay, so one more time. Moms demand. Husbands of the moms demand action. Will you please give them action and keep them busy? They don't have, give them something to do. They don't have enough to do. Because they're going after somebody who was deemed acting within the boundaries of the law, who was deemed not to be a vigilante. Whether or not you thought he should be there, that's a different story. The question is, were his actions within the boundaries of the law? And they found him not guilty of a crime. And that's not good enough. This is why we have to be careful. This is why we have to do bill reviews. This is why I have to skewer them. I have to get on my soapbox. Because groups like Moms Demand, they only care about their narrative and the outcome that they want. They don't really care about the law. Because if they did, half this wouldn't even be on the page. Then they goes on and says, myth, this bill makes it so that Californians cannot defend themselves and their families against attacks in their home. Not really. Everybody else was questioning it, but somehow Moms Demand, they know better, right? All these moms, they got done with the dishes, they packed their kids' lunches, and they know better than sheriffs who have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. They know better than lawyers who are coming out and saying, yeah, it's questionable. And they're just going to ignore the fact that Rick Zbur himself said, okay, I'm going to amend the bill to make it more clear. That means it wasn't clear in the first place and that people were reading it correctly, except for Moms Demand, because apparently they're part of the 49% that can't read at grade level or higher. This bill does not impact the Castle Doctrine, which is codified elsewhere in the state penal code. Okay, a lot of times, the statutes, they conflict with each other, and that creates problems. At the very minimum, that means somebody has to deal with the legal system for an action that they might have taken quite legally or reasonably. Myth. Californians involved in violent situations like rape or shootings are unable to use necessary force to protect themselves. Rape victims would be prosecuted for shooting and killing their attacker. Well, it depends. Did the attacker try to leave? Did he start raping the woman and then get up and say, okay, I'm done, I'm leaving, please don't shoot me, and then maybe come back? As far as I'm concerned, so long as that attacker is in the house, anywhere in the house, he's fair game after he's already attacked somebody. I know we don't want to hear that. We want to hear like, well, were they trying to get away? Well, how many times have we heard about somebody trying to get away, supposedly trying to get away, pretending to get away, and then they come back? A lot. This is not a new situation. I'm not making up some crazy situation that never happens. This literally does happen. Let's see here. Myth. This bill makes it illegal for Californians to defend themselves unless you first flee. This is false. If a person is under attack and it's necessary to use deadly force to protect themselves from serious harm, they are still entitled to use deadly force. Yeah, after they've deemed that the situation they can't reasonably get away. But we're still going to, by the virtue of the bill we just read, they are going to be second guessed, and they're going to go and have to prove that they weren't able to get away. So no, it's not that clear. And again, I keep going back to the fact that Mr. Zbur himself is taking the bill and amending it because it was not clear. So they're saying like, oh, all of these things are unclear, but I have to amend it because it's still clear. Like, so you got Moms Demand saying, nope, none of these things are true. It's not what the bill would do. It's totally a good bill. And then you got the writer of the bill saying, well, I guess I'll amend it so it's more clear. Because lawyers and sheriffs and people all across the country are reading it entirely differently. Just saying. The whole myth section is a bunch of garbage. The bill makes it illegal for Californians to defend themselves. This is false. Under this new language, a Californian may still use deadly force when necessary in situations where the imminent danger of serious bodily harm or death. Yes, it's in there, strictly speaking. However, it's narrowed. You should not be narrowing people's right to defend themselves because you want to go after a kid that was found not guilty. Because that's ultimately what this is. Notice that they didn't use any other name. They didn't provide any situation in California where this might have been a problem. They keep repeating Kyle's name, but Kyle was found not guilty. They don't like the not guilty verdict. They can't do anything about it, not the verdict. But what they can do is say, let's strengthen the law so that the next person around won't get that not guilty verdict. That's what they're trying to do. They don't care about the law. They care about their ideology. That's what they care about. Let's see what else. Okay, so that's basically the end of that. So there you have it. Moms demand they need to go find something to do. Go bake some cookies, right? You can make them sugar free and all other crunchy mom stuff. Go find something to do other than lying because you don't like the outcome of a result. Maybe they will get it if they're right. I'm not suggesting that they do this, but maybe they'll get it if a person of color is found not guilty and some Republican tries to say, well, they really should have been found guilty. So we're going to create this new law. Right? Imagine if it was the other way around. Boy, would they be howling. And rightfully so. I would be howling. I'd be like, whoa, dude, no. The person was found not guilty. What are you doing? You don't make stronger laws because somebody was found not guilty. I mean, at a point in time, we have to accept that we've pretty much covered all of the necessary situations that we're gonna expect. People keep acting as if like we just started the law a year ago, and it hasn't really covered. No, it covers quite a bit. It's expansive. It covers too much, actually. And as the sheriff pointed out in the video, he's like, "Look, we've already got a system that can deal with whether or not homicide was justifiable." So again, I go back to the author of the bill is going to rewrite the bill. He's going to amend it so that it's more clear about what he really meant to say, because clearly he doesn't know how to write a damn bill. And then you've got Mom's Demand, who's just making stuff up. They're just getting on their harpy train. And and then poor Kyle, I don't want to say poor Kyle. I mean, he's grown, he's a grown man now, right? Still young, but he's a grown man. Um, you know, but everybody's kind of going after him, kind of like in this roundabout way. They want to make sure that the next person that's being chased with a skateboard, by somebody smacking them with a skateboard and chasing them with a firearm, who lowers their weapon and then raises it again to shoot. They want to make sure that, hopefully the next person that has that happen to them, they don't shoot, they get shot. That's what and then they're going to be crying and be like, well, what about all this gun violence? And then we're going to have to be like, you dummy. You're the one that caused this. You just flipped the table on who was going to get shot because you're so busy being a busybody. Again, last time I'm going to say it. Go find something to do. Let's read the comments. Let's see what we got here. Get some comments in here, then we'll get up out of here. All right, let's see here. Where are we? I'm looking. Yes, Joe. DL thinks elected people read bills they vote on. No, I don't think they do. I think they don't in many cases. Now, in this particular case, he wrote the bill. So he read the bill, at least, because he wrote it, or at least he had a hand in crafting it, right? He presented it. And it's only 3 pages. So in this particular case, I could be like, nah, and he's telling us now, he's like, that's not what the bill says. So either he didn't read the bill, which is always a possibility, that he didn't read it at all. And he's like, no, that's not what it says. Yeah, I'll go and have whoever I had draft the bill, amend it. Like that could be the case too. But no, I don't believe that they generally read the bills. Right. And it leads to, what was that? Time surfing alien over here says, if you want to read it, you have to pass it. Nancy Pelosi, kind of like a little spin on, she was like, if we want to know what it says, well, it's not really a spin. It's just kind of rewording the same thing she said. We have to pass the bill so we know what's in it. Nah, read the bill. How about that? Read the bill. And if you don't read it and you can't tell me what it says and you vote yes, then maybe we should throw you out of office right away. Just figure out, okay, what's our recall process? We'll throw you right on out and we'll feed you to the gators. Let's see what else we got here. Yes, Time Surfing Alien says 99% of statistics are made up on the spot. I 100% agree. Let's see what else we got here. I'm looking here. I think it's all the comments that because I'm not sure the context of some of these comments, so I'm not really sure. Um, yeah, so I don't really know, but I do appreciate this time surfing aliens as I shared before we started. I believe you mean the episode. Please do share this episode, um, especially if you're on Rumble. Make sure you share it. Make sure you encourage. If you're on Rumble and you're not following me, please follow me. I'm very close to being in that being eligible for their new creator program. I'm not entirely familiar with the details, but I would like to get in it, and I need to have 100 followers. Small channel. I'm still trying to grow. I think I'm at like 88 right now, so it's like I got like 12 more to go. So if you're watching me on Rumble, kind of throw that out there for me. Help me get ahead, right? I'm working my tail off here to try to produce a good show. So the absolute least that I could get you to do is at least make sure that you share my content. Feel free to clip it, and if you like something and you're like, oh, let me clip this real quick, and then put it out there on social media, and you can tag me. I'll probably more than likely, repost it. Depending on what you say. Like if you're like, yeah, he's a dummy, then I probably won't. But you know, so do me a favor, folks. Definitely help promote the show. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and close the show out for today. It was great being here with you. I am so tired. I got to go deal with this. All right. So have a good one, folks. And I will see you next time. Thank you for watching. And I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.